Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday afternoon. Week 15 of the NFL season is in the books, which means the first week of the fantasy playoffs is in the books. I had 8 teams that had a first round bye. Of my other matchups, I went 9-7. Could have been worse, could have been better. It turns out I couldn't remember how many teams I had Cooper Kupp on, but I had Cooper Kupp and Darnell Mooney as my starting wide receivers on one of those teams. That would be in that team of 7. I lost by 5 points. I kind of wanted to cry a little bit when I saw that.
So I went 1-3 in my dynasty first round playoffs. I needed 26 points about 26 points last night, 24 points from Bijan and Darnell Mooney. I mean, Bijan gave it the old college try, but God damn it, Kirk Cousins.
I know.
Mooney's been getting you there.
We got to talk about Atlanta, and we will. We are going to go through all of the games. We will go back and first look at the early Sunday games. The first of those was Kansas City Chiefs, one of their easier wins of the season recently, getting a 21-7 victory over the Cleveland Browns. But Mahomes leaves with an ankle injury. It's a high ankle sprain. They now play 2 games pretty tight. They are on Saturday against the Houston Texans, Christmas Day against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mahomes practiced today. They do probably have the best backup quarterback in the league with Carson Wentz sitting back there, but how concerning should it be, this Mahomes injury?
Well, I don't know if Mahomes is the best or Wentz is the best backup or not, because he hasn't been getting a lot of run the last few years. Now, granted, nobody really has a good backup quarterback. Quarterbacks, there's a dozen that everybody would like to have as a starter, and then there's 20 others that you have to have start.
You might have said Cleveland had one of the best backups, but good old Jameis has kind of imploded here.
He traded Josh Dobbs away, so. Wentz, I think Wentz right now is serviceable. We got to see what goes on. I think they've got a team that can protect him. They've got a good defense. He doesn't have to, they have been winning this year without gaudy passing stats. I don't think anything changes with Wentz back there. The defense has been big all season. They're 7th overall. 3rd versus the run, 20th versus the pass, the 8th fewest sacks, but they have the 2nd highest QB knockdown and 4th highest quarterback pressure rate. So the defense makes it uncomfortable for the opponent's quarterbacks. We saw that with Jameis Winston. They pulled Winston, they put in Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who had a sub 50% completion rate. And if you extrapolate DTR's numbers out to where Winston was, he probably has 3 interceptions too. So I want to say that the defense is going to have to carry him for a couple weeks. They're not playing for the number 1 seed. Yeah, that it would be great. They're going to win their division likely. I mean, the Broncos are giving it the old college try, but they need DJ Humphries to get his hamstring healthy.
The Chiefs, the Chiefs already won the AFC West.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, their win over the Chargers gave it to them, I guess.
All right, well, good for them. So they'll get a wild card in the matchup probably because I don't think they're catching the Bills.
They're still 13-1. They're still the number 1 seed. They have to lose 2 games for the Bills to catch them.
What about the Ravens aren't having a great year either. So who knows? Maybe then, I guess I should follow the standings as close as you.
Well, and sorry, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot.
Thanks, man.
The real question, if it was me, I've seen the Texans offense. We will talk about them in a few minutes. I probably would try to sit Mahomes on Saturday and see if I could get him back against the Steelers. But most importantly, with those high ankle sprains, if you rest it a little bit, you can bounce back. If you can play through it, but if you re-injure it, you could be really monster host. And they have a game to give. They lose the tiebreaker with the Bills, but they're 13-1. Bills are 11-3. So they've got, if they lost one game, it wouldn't knock them out of the 1 seed. I might try to roll the dice at home against the Texans.
Yeah, well, I'd roll against the Texans with Wentz. Let's pull it out. They'll get. I love CJ Stroud, but he's having an off year. They should be able to pull out the win there. Then I keep him on the bench against Pittsburgh too. That's the game I'd be giving. That way he's not getting hit by TJ Watt.
Well, that's the thing. If they win at home with Wentz against the Texans, then I think you really have no motivation to throw him out there on Christmas Day. And if he wants a tune-up before they are in their final game, they would play the Denver Broncos in Denver, which could be good. Or you give him like 24 days or something off, and then he's back to full. I don't think he's the kind of guy that needs a bunch of reps to stay in game shape.
And he's not running a lot. So, and if we've seen him tear his ankle up before and played through it, he just doesn't, he doesn't run. He gets rid of the ball faster then and makes sure he doesn't take a hit.
Meanwhile, Jameis Winston, a 3-interception day, as you mentioned, was relieved by Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Not a great showing from him, 4 of 9 for 18 yards and his own interception, but he will be starting in Week 16. What does that mean to you and to the Browns?
He's a developmental guy. At some point, you got to take a look. He wasn't ready when they put him in last year. And maybe with some starters reps in practice, he'll be a little better prepared. Last year, he was completely overwhelmed. And, 4 for 9 for 18 yards and an interception. It's not super good this year either. But let's let him get some work. He threw over 1,300 college passes in 50 games. He threw for over 10,000 yards with 88 touchdowns. If the game plan is right, if they can protect him next week, then maybe there's a chance he can be serviceable. It doesn't do the Browns any good to win games, but I say that as a fan and a fantasy player. They're out there trying to win. They need to look like they're playing hard, and they're proud. Players are proud. They don't tank. Front offices tank. Players don't. But 4 of DTR's 9 targets went to Jerry Jeudy. So, we know what job 1 is. He was only 2 for 4 for 13 yards to Jeudy, but that was 13 of his 18 yards that he threw for. Tillman was out, so if we can get Tillman back, if Njoku is somewhat healthy, Jerome Ford bounced out and took 162 yards for a touchdown. Who knows? They could very well get into a what do we got to lose mentality and got guys playing for opportunity next year, and they just go ham.
Yeah, We'll certainly see. Nick Chubb lost for the rest of the year, broke his foot, so that does give Ford more opportunities. I think DTR being the starter is probably something of a gift to the Bengals, their Week 16 opponent, and that Bengals defense. Bengals not out of the playoff picture. They went to Tennessee, got the 37-27 victory. Not a lot to say about Cincinnati. They have 4 good fantasy players. As long as they're healthy, you should play them, and anyone else is a dice throw. But for the Tennessee Titans, Will Levis, a horrendous game, threw 3 interceptions, got replaced by Mason Rudolph in the game, will be replaced by Mason Rudolph in Week 16. Do you think this is possibly the end of the Will Levis experiment?
Well, I think one thing before we just gloss over Cincinnati, we got to remember they gave up 4 touchdowns to Tennessee. It wasn't like, Tennessee couldn't move the ball. And Tennessee's not a super team. They've got some good players. They're weak at quarterback with Levis and Rudolph. I think unless Levis gets hot, I think there is, it's over for him as, the de facto QB of the future. Right now, Tennessee would pick 6th, I believe it is. And, Cam Ward and Shadir Sanders are going to be gone. I don't think there's anybody they should reach for in the draft there. So they're going to be looking at a second-round quarterback, Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck. Hell, I don't even know who all. I don't have my list in front of me. So it isn't like there are great quarterbacks waiting. There's not going to be 6 quarterbacks picked in the first. There's not going to be 4 quarterbacks picked in the first round this season. I'm not Nostradamus, but I'm pretty comfortable with that. Could be wrong. I've been wrong once or twice.
I think,
but it doesn't. It feels like Levis has squandered his opportunity.
Yeah, they have enough pieces. I would wonder if they would be a candidate to try to go to get somebody like a Sam Darnold, who is going to be available, and just go another way. Because you're right, probably not quite high enough in the draft.
I mean, if Carson Wentz plays well for a couple games, he's a guy that might get a shot. But surprisingly, he's 34 years old now, 32 years old. He's not a spring chicken. He's a lot older than you might think.
The Washington Commanders hosted the New Orleans Saints, came away with the 20-19 victory. It was a little closer than I think any of us thought. Commanders looked pretty good early, but couldn't quite put them away. How do you feel about Washington as a contender in the NFC? They're 9-5. Looks like they'll make the playoffs, but how do you feel about them as a contender?
So it's about the matchup. So it looks like right now they'd likely play one of Tampa Bay, the Rams, or the Seahawks. And if I'm Washington, probably the team I'd like to avoid is Tampa Bay, because they have probably the most explosive offense. So the Commanders, if they get a shot against the Rams or Seattle, they may be able to pull out a win.
I actually think the Commanders right now are the 7th seed, which would mean they'd probably play the Eagles or the Lions or the Vikings, depending on which of them ends up number 2.
Well, that's what I get for putting it together before the game's all wrapped.
Well, no, I mean, they're not that far behind Green Bay, depending on how it tracks. But I think their best case scenario would be that they get to play the Rams more, or the best case scenario is that they get to play the Rams or the Buccaneers. But it looks more like they might play Philly. I think this is a huge game for them coming up this next week, hosting the Eagles, to show what they've got.
Well, I don't think Detroit holds on to the number 1 seed. Just throwing it out there.
I'm keeping hope alive. We got to see.
May not hold on to their division.
We got to see both Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler on Sunday. Haener 4 of 10, 49 yards of interception before he came out. Spencer Rattler 10 of 21, 135, a touchdown, no interceptions. Saints facing kind of a brutal offseason. Do either of those two guys inspire you?
No, I had hopes for Rattler, and honestly, it would have probably been better for him to just not play at all this year. Now that being said, Derek Carr, if he left after this season, or they may bring in a higher draft capital pick, new coaching staff, gonna go get their guy. I mean, Rattler has some tools. He's got a big arm. He can make all the throws. But can he put everything together? And I don't know how much of it is. They're down Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Alvin Kamara got injured. Who knows, what really is going on with the interim coach and the offense. I think Rattler, it looks like he's going to be one of these guys that's going to ride the pine for 2 or 3 seasons. And maybe he does get a shot down the road. I like his tools better than Haener, but Haener could be one of these Tim Boyle kind of characters that spends 10 years in the NFL as a backup, and maybe he develops too. We see quarterbacks. It's easy to fall in love with the big arm, the guys that can make all the throws, or the super athletic guys. But we see guys all the time that are, 6'1", 205 pounds that stick around because they do all the little things right, and coaches learn to trust them.
Next up, the Ravens went to New York, got the 35-14 victory over the Giants, who are currently tracking as the number 1 overall pick, which is probably the best thing for them. Rashad Bateman got a contract extension this offseason, raised a few eyebrows, but we have seen him continue to produce 3 receptions, 80 yards, 2 touchdowns. Again on Sunday for the Ravens. The Ravens have mutually agreed to have Deontay Johnson nowhere near their football team for this week and probably the rest of the season. That seems like an endorsement for Bateman, some of the other young players we've seen. How do you feel about Bateman in Dynasty?
So when I put the numbers together, Sunday, he was wide receiver 36. So he may be a little bit.
Because you got that big ass water bottle,
Yep.
but you better than everything.
What was that?
I have no idea. My phone just started playing.
What are you watching there? No, I think he's wide receiver 36, but he's hard to trust. He's had 3 wide receiver 1 weeks and 7 weeks where he's been a wide receiver 5 or worse. So if he could get consistent, then maybe, but it's like playing whack-a-mole.
My phone. It's my wife sent me something, and I have no idea what it is, but trying to.
Shouldn't be sending you reels while you're on the show, man. That's unprofessional.
Yeah, no kidding. Well,
That's right in.
I thought it was just some kind of text. I think it's because I acknowledged it on the computer. Sometimes having Apple helps you, and sometimes having it all synced up doesn't do you any favors. Meanwhile, for the Giants, Tyrone Tracy started off really hot, but of late we have just seen him just be okay. He hasn't had more than 45 yards rushing in any of the last 4 games. Has a couple of touchdowns that have helped, but only 31 yards rushing on 10 carries and 1 reception Sunday. The Giants looking at probably a pretty big overhaul this offseason. A lot of rumblings now that will include a coach and GM. How do you feel about Tracy for a long-term future?
He's a hashtag 2 to 3 year window guy for me. I think that he'll be there next year. He's probably going to enter the offseason as the top running back. It may put whoever is the new coach, if they get a new coach, or Daboll, if he's still there, may very well feel like it's, this is a position we can make it a lower priority. That being said, he's looked good, but it's starting as the season has went on and the quarterback play has gotten progressively worse and the offensive line play has gotten progressively worse. It's it's a bad look all around for the Giants. They're struggling on offense terribly. The only thing that you can hang your hat on right now with the Giants is that whoever's playing quarterback is going to chuck the ball in Malik Neighbors' direction 15 times. You know, even Tracy's now getting vultured by Devin Singletary, which is a bummer. But I like Tracy as a flex-worthy guy I'd like to have on my dynasty roster for next season. But if I also get a decent offer for him, I'm not afraid to move him either. He's not a guy I'm, dying. He's not a hill I'm dying on.
Well, it was a low draft capital investment for the Giants, so that always makes you a little bit nervous when you're talking about a complete overhaul. But they have a lot of holes to fill, so maybe I'm still holding out hope as well. The Dallas Cowboys went to the Carolina Panthers, got the 30-14 victory. That was honestly one of the more surprising results of the day for me. The Panthers had been playing better, but Cooper Rush got off to a bit of a slow start, but the last 5 games he has thrown for almost 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. Is he starting to become a fantasy consideration?
Yeah, I think so, and especially in Superflex leagues. 1,200 yards over 5 games isn't anything to sneeze at. He's throwing the ball to CeeDee Lamb. I get throwing the ball to Jalen Tolbert, because he's your de facto 2A, 2B guy with Brandon Cooks. Why are you throwing touchdowns to Jalen Brooks, man? Stop that. But Rico Dowdle's played well, and he's balancing out
Dallas
the offense.
doesn't realize they're not in the race anymore.
Yeah. It makes it with Dowdle playing as well as he's been playing, it balances the offense out some, and it makes it, I think, easy all around for to keep the defense off balance. And I might argue that Rush might be the best backup in the league.
I mean, he hasn't been too bad. He's actually been pretty decent when the Cowboys have called upon him. On the other side, we saw the young receiver.
You know what I don't want? I don't want to. I'm not keen on him going up against Philadelphia in Week 17 for a championship game.
Yeah, well, that's the way it goes sometimes. Meanwhile, for the Panthers, a young receiver, Jalen Coker, had another big game, 4 receptions, 110 yards, and a touchdown. He has 21 receptions for 373 yards so far this season. Any long-term interest in him?
His numbers are inflated by a couple of long touchdowns. He's got pretty good measurables. He's 6'1", he's over 200 pounds. He did only run a 4.57 at the combine. So that's probably the one thing that gives you pause. He doesn't have great agility, but he's got pretty good burst. And he's got a head start to go along to outrun the defense typically. But he seems to have good hands. It looks like he is playing his way into the heir apparent to Adam Thielen as the big slot guy.
Next up, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while, and that's how we will explain the New York Jets actually finding a victory. They get the 32-25 win in Jacksonville. Devontae Adams, another monster game, saw 12 targets, caught 9 for 198 and 2 touchdowns. Been kind of an up and down rough couple of years for him, but how are you feeling about Adams and his long-term value? You think he stays with the Jets?
What do you know off the top of your head what his contract situation is? He's got a couple more years on it, doesn't he?
Yeah, I'll look.
I don't think he's not going to follow Aaron Rodgers around. I think we've looked at this, and I think he reasonably is going to go, this team might be shit, but also if I'm following Aaron Rodgers around, it's not because I'm trying to win. It's because I know this goofball is going to target me over more talented players than Garrett Wilson. Now, I think Adams still has some left in the tank, but he's 33 years old, I think. Get 32, 33. So I think he'll still he turns 32 on Christmas Eve. Hey, I made a note.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about how I feel having him continually tied to Rodgers. It feels like you're hoping. I don't see a lot of these 198-yard games, 2-touchdown games in his future like that. I like Adams. If he's my wide receiver 3, I like him even more because he's got this upside. But as he's getting older, Rodgers is getting older. They're going to have, a new offense. Will he adjust? Will the, new offensive scheme be something that fits his skill set? Those are some big questions in the offseason.
The Jets can get out of it for $8.3 million dead, $8.4 million about dead cap this offseason.
That's not too bad.
It's not
That's
too
pretty
bad.
good.
We'll have to see. Meanwhile, for the Jaguars, we got to see Brenton Strange again, and that was a good thing. He also saw 12 targets, caught 11 for 73. We have seen him step up each and every time Evan Ingram has been out. Are you starting to like him more long term?
Yeah, he felt like a guy that was poised to be that second tight end in Jacksonville when Doug Peterson said, you know what, I'm going to run back the Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert days down here in Duval. He's got good size, 6'4", 255, 260 pounds. Last week he had an 82% route participation per JJ Zacharyson with a 28% target share. He's got good size. He's a pretty good athlete. He did catch 70 passes in college at Penn State, so he comes from a big-time program. I don't think the stage is too big for him. And if they decide that they're done with Evan Ingram because he just keeps getting injured and stuff, I don't think that the drop-off – there's a decent drop-off from Ingram to Strange, but I think Strange is a – oh, spider. I think Strange is a reasonably good starting tight end candidate in the NFL.
Next up, the Dolphins went to Houston, and the Texans get the 20-12 victory. Dennis, the Miami offense has been all over the place and pretty inconsistent this year. We love Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle potentially in that offense, but they combined for 9 targets and get 2 receptions for 36 yards, not helping a lot of people first week of the fantasy playoffs. How are you feeling about this Dolphins offense long term?
So the Dolphins have one huge, giant, significant, monstrous problem that they need to solve. And that is that they can't beat winning teams. They only have like 3 wins or something. I saw a tweet that I didn't make note of, but they're like 3 wins off of teams against teams. It doesn't feel right to say with a winning record, but there's something. They just can't beat good teams. Now they beat the hell out of bad teams. They run up the score. They make good. They're great for fantasy against bad teams, but they're going to have to, step up to the mirror in the offseason, do some soul searching, and figure out how they can beat winning teams.
Yeah, and this year I don't even know if they've been able to run it up very much or put up huge numbers against bad teams either. There's something off, and hopefully they get it figured out.
They've got good weapons, really good weapons with Hill and Waddle and Achane, and Jonnu Smith, tight end. Now that they decide they want to use the tight end, and Tua, as long as he keeps his head on his shoulders, they have good weapons and they can make plays. They just have to figure out how to do it against teams that punch back.
Meanwhile, the Texans get the victory, but it wasn't pretty. Just kind of another vanilla, low-scoring game for Houston's offense. They aren't doing anything particularly great, only 131 yards passing on 26 attempts for Stroud. They only get 77 rushing combined on 20 attempts. Is it time to worry a little bit about this Texans offense as we near the playoffs?
they feel like a one and done team in the playoffs. They're in that we're going to have to gut it out phase while we learn how to be a consistent winner. Certainly in a sophomore slump, especially for fantasy. And while he only threw for 131 yards, he did complete 70% of his passes with 2 touchdowns. So there is something to be like, hey, we did something good. On the season, his completion percentage is about the same as it was last year as a rookie, but his yardage is down about 40 yards per game. His touchdown rate is down about 20%, and his interception rate has doubled. So he's turning the ball over, throwing the ball, and he's not throwing the ball nearly as much. I don't think that losing Stephon Diggs is really the reason why. I think just they're overall, we need to figure out. They need to go borrow Miami's mirror and look in the mirror and figure out, what's going so different this year than last year, because they've got a lot of the same players.
Yeah. One of the most exciting games of the day, although it was like Sophie's choice for me because I love both teams. Buffalo went to Detroit, got the 48-42 victory. Second week in a row that we've seen Ty Johnson really explode in the passing game. Seems to be carving out a niche back there. Is he a player you might have some interest in for a flex opportunity?
It's like playing whack-a-mole with the Buffalo running backs. You feel pretty good about James Cook, but you recognize that any given week he could be in that, 8 to 10 point range. But when it comes to Ray Davis and Ty Johnson, you just don't know. 48% of Ty Johnson's targets and 41% of his receiving yards were in week 15. So is that a trend or is it a fluke? Right now, I'm leaning a little bit more like McDermott and who's the OC? Brady? Joe Brady?
Yeah, Joe Brady.
I think he's the OC. I think they saw something in the Lions defense, the fact that most of their good players are in the infirmary probably. But they were able to exploit that with Ty Johnson. It was his first RB1 game of the season. He's got just 2 RB2 games on the year. So if I'm flexing him in week 15, 16, is that what we're in 16?
Yeah, 16.
If I'm flexing him, I am nervous.
Meanwhile, for Detroit, they've continued to take injuries on defense, had some more on Sunday, but now the injury spilling over to the offense. David Montgomery tore his MCL, is out for the year, going to have surgery. What does that do to the Lions offense?
Well, I don't know. I'm okay having just Jahmyr Gibbs as my running back. Dude's pretty good. And we've seen Craig Reynolds come in and be, and Jermar Jefferson, be guys that could, spell the back for a few. I think that Detroit showed me this weekend that they can put up points, but their defense has just taken too many losses. You can't just keep losing. They've lost 3 of their 4 starting defensive linemen. They lost Alex Anzalone and Alex Anzalone's backup. It just keeps going and going. Lost Carlton Davis. If we, and I say we because I'm a Lions fan, if we are going against a team that can score, we're going to be in trouble. Our offense can score. We scored 42 points against Buffalo. That's pretty good. And the game wasn't as close as 6 points.
Next up in the battle for Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh Steelers went to play the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles get the 27-13 victory. The Steelers were missing George Pickens again, and they just really seem to be struggling to get any offense going. Do they just not have enough weapons?
That is correct. Calvin Austin, God bless him, Mike Williams, just Van Jefferson. Freiermuth is getting some opportunities because Austin isn't consistent enough. Jefferson isn't good enough. And Mike Williams, Lord knows what's going on there.
I know only
and when they can't throw the ball, then they can't run the ball either. So then you shut down both Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. It was not great. They need to have that alpha receiver that can get it done in just about any situation.
For the Eagles, meanwhile, there was a lot of comments about their passing game going into last week's game. 25 of 32, 290 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. They seem to put a focus on the passing game and feeding Brown and Devonta Smith, who combined for 23 targets and 19 receptions. Do you think that got the passing game back on track?
I think that the Eagles can pass whenever they want. And sometimes when you have Saquon Barkley, you might, and Jalen Hurts, the way he runs the ball, maybe you just don't want to pass the ball that much. So they've got lots of receiving weapons. And I'm not concerned about that offense. They have one of the better offensive lines in the league as well. And the way their defense plays, they don't have to score 40 points or 50 points to win games, typically.
All right. Well, next up, the Denver Broncos hosted the Indianapolis Colts. The Broncos get the 31-13 victory, but it could have been very different. Jonathan Taylor had a breakaway 41-yard, what looked to be a touchdown that looked to put the Colts up 20-7 at the time, but he let go of the ball as he was crossing the goal line, ended up being ruled a fumble and going out of the back of the end zone to create a touchback. The Colts seemingly never recovered. How big was that fumble?
Well, it wasn't ruled a fumble. It was called a fumble because it was a fumble. I don't get these kids. Get off my lawn, carry the ball into the end zone and go hand it to the referee. Stop trying to showboat. Yeah, I mean, when you have a beautiful run like that, just take care of business. He didn't take care of business. Would it have been 31-20? Maybe, but I think that is a big momentum swing, and Jonathan Taylor hasn't had the kind of year that I think fantasy managers had hoped he would have. We'll have to see what kind of growth Anthony Richardson has this summer, because with Richardson at quarterback, it's been detrimental to a lot of Colts assets.
Yeah, and another very tough passing day for him, only 17 of 38. Some of his throws were just wildly off target. Meanwhile, for Denver, the backfield continues to be an enigma, which gives us pause for Javonte Williams. This is his 4th season, going to be a free agent after this year. Only 6 carries for 15 yards on Sunday. Only saw 3 targets, caught 2 passes for 8 yards. We've seen him have some big games, but has not been consistent there. How do you feel about his long-term value?
Well, if I'm Javonte Williams, I tell my agent, don't negotiate with Denver unless they fire Sean Payton. Pate, I get it, they're winning, but this whole backfield is a mess. I think Williams is the most talented of the running backs, but I think he should go somewhere in free agency. He's probably not going to get handed a job. He's probably going to have to go somewhere like J.K. Dobbins did and go earn a job. I think he's got the talent to do that. The downside is that it's a pretty good running back class this year in the draft. And so he may find himself left out in the cold and having to sign, a backup contract somewhere. I like Williams' talent. I think he's good on all three downs. I think between injuries and misuse by the offense, it's just been a tough go of it for him.
Yeah, and the offense and the rotation has been frustrating, but I think he has not made the most of his opportunities, and I don't exactly know why. He's a player I'll be curious to see if he gets a chance somewhere else to see what comes of him. The Patriots.
I feel like he needs to be in a committee of two that's going to get at least 20 total rushes, so that each guy gets 8 to 10 opportunities to run the ball. They get some better consistency, but that's just me.
Meanwhile, the Patriots went to Arizona, the Cardinals getting the 30-17 victory. Drake May had a decent game and had a decent game for fantasy, but all the rest of the Patriots players are all over the board, being in a crucial spot in the fantasy playoffs, aside from May maybe being a super flex option. Are they kind of a stay away for fantasy right now?
I think pretty much, you probably have to start Ramondre based on where you drafted him, unless you've done some wheeling and dealing. And he's been up and down. Like he had 5.3 yards per carry, 13 carries, but he only had one pass reception, no touchdowns. He's got the body and the ability. He should be getting more work. Kayshon Boutte led the team in targets again, but he only converted 2 for 19. So there wasn't much there. I feel like if I'm stashing one of these receivers for next year, it's Boutte. But I also don't think his ceiling is really high. He's more of a flex play. I think Jalen Polk gives you some ceiling. I don't know if Kendrick Bourne will even be back. Demario Douglas, he's a slot guy. So Boutte's probably the guy that I would want to stash.
Meanwhile, for the Cardinals, we were pretty interested in Trey Benson when he was drafted, but we haven't seen him make much of an impact. Only had 63 carries so far, which has resulted in 291 yards and a touchdown. Decent 4.6 average. Only 6 receptions for 59 yards. We know James Conner is coming back. How are you feeling about Benson's long-term value?
I'm okay with Benson's value. I think he gets more work next year. And then after 2025, the Cardinals can get out of Conner's contract for just $2.25 million. So I think Conner's he's 30 years old, 29, 30 years old. He's a great story. He's overcome cancer. He's overcome injury. And he's great for that team. If I have Benson, I'm probably not looking to move him. We've seen Conner get injured a lot, and so I'm not overly concerned that Benson won't get opportunity. I think for the next 12 months it'll be a little bit inconsistent, but he is a pretty talented back.
Next up, the Buccaneers went to Los Angeles, got the huge 40-17 victory over the Chargers. Dennis Baker Mayfield has reborn his career in Tampa Bay. Was QB 10 last year for the Buccaneers. So far through 15 weeks, he is QB 5 on the season. We've seen him thrive even with Godwin and Evans out of the lineup, seemingly making the most of all of his receivers. How are you feeling about him in Dynasty?
He's signed through 2026, so we feel pretty comfortable. He's, unless it falls apart next year, he's going to be there for a couple years with the same coaching staff. Evans signed through 2025. I'm pretty comfortable that he's going to be there next year as well. Godwin coming off the injury, I'm not sure. I didn't really look up his contract stuff. Jalen McMillan is coming on. It's looking like he might be a thing. He could be the successor to Godwin there in the slot. They've got a couple other guys. Wandale is a depth guy that pops off here and there. I forget who the other guy was. Trey Palmer, same type of thing. But Cade Otton is a very good tight end, and when they needed him, he really delivered. It'd be nice to see them use him more consistently when the rest of the weapons are healthy. And then they've got a pretty good three-headed backfield as well. So they just need to keep their O-line and their defense going, and it should be just fine for Baker.
On the flip side, for the Chargers, they are still very much in the playoff race, but outside of Ladd McConkey, it's been hard to find anyone that you can rely on consistently in this offense. Is this something this offseason? Do the Chargers need to put a focus on getting weapons in the backfield and the passing game?
Yeah, I think they need – so I'm not sure if Ladd is a 1. Is Ladd a 1A? Do they need to get a wide receiver too? He's played really well when he's gotten the opportunity. He stepped up, took charge of the passing game there, developed a nice chemistry with Justin Herbert. They just need to be more consistent with the other wide receivers, the running back, and the tight end. If they can kind of get consistent there, I think it'll be good for Ladd McConkey and continue to open things up. He's kind of a wide receiver 1 in that Amon-Ra St. Brown mold, that he can play inside and be super successful. He can give you some snaps outside. He's faster than Amon-Ra, but he's similar in size. I like Ladd, but the team needs to beef up some of their other skill positions.
Next up, Sunday Night Football, the Green Bay Packers went to Seattle, which had been a rough place for them to play in recent years, but they got a 30-13 victory this week. Dennis, the Green Bay Packers have an embarrassment of riches on offense. They have a good quarterback. They have 3 good receivers. They have an interesting 4th receiver. They have a good tight end. They have a good running back. But all that means that they can be somewhat frustrating week to week from fantasy. How are you approaching them during a crucial stretch of the playoffs?
I want Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs because they are the ones that feel locked into volume. Tucker Kraft is probably the next one that I feel is going to get consistent opportunity, as I look up and see he only had 2 targets last week. The receivers are hard because, they go 5 deep with Bo Melton, and he didn't get a sniff this week. So the receivers all are a little bit different. You've got the big, fast field stretcher with Christian Watson. You've got the chain mover possession guy that breaks off some runs with Romeo Doubs. You've got the Swiss Army knife in Jaden Reed. And you got Dontavian Wicks that kind of slides into whatever role he's needed, but he brings size. He's a big guy. I feel pretty good that most weeks Watson, Dobbs, and Reed are going to get 5 to 7 opportunities. Will they convert? That's going to be the real question. It'd be better if, a couple of these guys got injured and, then we had to narrow that funnel. I'm not wishing injury on them. Don't get yourself in a bunch. I I just, for fantasy, we want a narrow funnel. We want to know who's going to get the most volume. And yeah, 5 and 6 targets is pretty good volume in a lot of offenses. We want 8, 9, 10 targets is what we want.
Meanwhile, for Seattle, Geno Smith gets his knee dinged up. Sam Howell comes in, only 5 of 14, 24 yards, and an interception, managed to get sacked 4 times, playing just 1 quarter. If Geno can't go, how much trouble are the Seahawks in?
Depends on how much Sam Howell studies this week, because it looked like he didn't study much last week. He had a rough go of it that 1 quarter. Howell took a lot of sacks last year, but he threw a lot of passes. He threw for a lot of yards. He put up productive fantasy numbers. With Jackson Smith and Jigba and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant, Zach Charbonnet, he has players that can take care of the ball for him. He just has to trust what he's seeing and get rid of the ball. I have concerns. It did not look good this last week. It looked like he'd had a year layoff.
Yeah, definitely concerning. We had a Monday Night Football doubleheader. The first half of that was the Chicago Bears at the Minnesota Vikings. Bears lost their 8th straight as the Vikings get the 30-12 victory. Dennis, Caleb Williams, we've seen some decent moments, but he just doesn't seem to be getting the growth and stepping up the end of the season. If you were watching him last night, just some wild fastballs, hard to tell who he's targeting. Sometimes even the announcers making comments. Is it time to worry a little bit about his development and his future?
It's been a tough year for him. He started out the year with a piss-poor offensive coordinator and head coach, and they went and he got a new offensive coordinator and head coach, and they want to make an impact. They're not going to be the coaches next year, so he's going to be going into year 2 on his 3rd head coach and 3rd offensive coordinator. It's been a struggle, and being consistent when you're a rookie is hard enough, but when you have that kind of turnover, and then the season started off with the O-line playing really bad, and then the O-line kind of gelled for a while, and then it started to fall apart again. It's easy to put it all on Caleb Williams' shoulders. I think he's an immensely talented player. I'm okay kind of writing off year 1 and seeing where it goes in year 2 with the new staff.
Meanwhile, for the Vikings, let's talk about Jordan Addison a little bit for Dynasty as a rookie. A lot of injuries on that team. He ended up seeing 108 targets, caught 70 for 9, 11, and 10 touchdowns so far. 77 targets playing with Justin Jefferson, has 51 for 771 and 7 touchdowns, currently on pace for 62 receptions for 936 yards and 9 touchdowns. So about an equivalent season. How are you feeling about him long term?
I think Addison has shown that there's room for both of them in that offense. Let me see. He's wide. What? It's not what I wanted. All right, let me go find it. He is wide receiver 21 on the year. And when you have a wide receiver like Justin Jefferson across from you, I think being wide receiver 21 is pretty good. But, he's popped off. He's had a 30.2 and 39.3 in 2 of his last 4 weeks. That's propped him up some. He's probably a wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside. My biggest concern is that I think J.J. McCarthy is a game manager, a lower passing volume guy who is going to focus the ball on Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and it's going to limit some of the opportunities that he's getting this year, and the volume going forward isn't going to be quite as much. So if I roster Addison, it might be time to move him in Dynasty.
The final game of the week was not very great. The Monday night doubleheader cap featured the Atlanta Falcons going to Las Vegas to play the Raiders. Desmond Ridder getting the start as Aiden O'Connell couldn't go. Kirk Cousins led the Falcons to a 15-9 victory. Cousins had come in on a slump, and the game plan certainly seemed like they were trying to avoid throwing the ball as much as possible. Only 11 of 17, 112 yards, had a touchdown, also had another interception. Did not look great. The Falcons are behind the Buccaneers. They're a game back. They do have that tiebreaker with 3 to play, but they don't have the easiest schedule down the stretch. Is it officially time to worry about Kirk Cousins?
I think so. He's QB 29 since week 12. And frankly, he cost me a game last night. He cost me moving on. I needed 25, 26 points from Bijan Robinson and Darnell Mooney. Bijan did his part. You know, Kirk targeted Mooney one time. It's hard for Mooney to do anything. It was a bummer. The team's probably a year ahead of schedule, so it's probably rightfully so that I was defeated. But, man, I was really hoping to pull it out. Kirk just looks bad. He looks like there's no confidence. He doesn't look like he's confident in his arm. He doesn't look like he's confident in the offense, which is awful because he's got so many weapons.
Yeah, and if the Raiders were a little bit better there at the end of the game, they might have actually won or tied. It was just a dreadful performance from Atlanta's offense. Speaking of dreadful performances this week, Sincere McCormick got elevated to be the starter for the Raiders in the backfield. That did not pan out that great. 7 carries for 8 yards, 2 receptions for 17 yards. Actually got outrushed by Alexander Madison on the same number of carries, and really got outplayed by Amir Abdullah, who was a dominant factor in the passing game. How are you feeling about McCormick?
Well, not as good as I was since he's injured. He may have, if he had not gotten injured, he might have been able to do more with his later opportunities, be more productive. He's an undrafted free agent for a reason. I like the guy as a story and wanted to see him do well, but I'm not sure. I don't think the 2025 starting running back for the Las Vegas Raiders is on the roster.
No, but it will be interesting. I know McCormick was a trendy pickup last week, probably didn't help a lot of people. And as you mentioned, probably, there's conflicting reports, but it sounds like he might be done for the year. He could be a dynasty stash. I feel better about him as a dynasty stash than Dylan Lobby, who was somebody I was kind of interested in the offseason. But I think the Raiders are another team that needs a pretty big offseason overhaul. Thursday night kicks off week 16, and it is a good one and a very important one. The 9-5 Denver Broncos at the 8-6 Los Angeles Chargers. Not only a big matchup in the AFC West, but these are the two teams that are vying for the 6 and 7 seeds in the wild card right now. What are you expecting from this matchup?
So, it's a division game, so sometimes you can, throw the numbers out the window. The Broncos are 9-5, the Chargers are 8-6, and so they're playing in Los Angeles. The Denver passing offense is ranked 23rd. The Chargers passing defense is ranked 11th. Denver's rushing offense is 19th. Given the way they've been used, I'm surprised it's that high. The Chargers rushing defense is 18th, so they'll give up some numbers there. The Chargers passing offense is 25th, and Denver's passing defense is 18th, even with Patrick Surtain. And the Chargers rush offense is 20th versus Denver's 5th ranked rushing defense. I think where the area that's going to make the difference is going to be the passing versus Denver's pass defense. Denver gets the most sacks in the NFL and the 4th most interceptions, and the Chargers give up the 10th most sacks. So Justin Herbert is going to be under pressure. Patrick Surtain is going to be the guy most likely on Ladd McConkey. So it'll be then for Jordan Palmer or Joshua Palmer or Quentin Johnson to step up. Maybe if Will Dissly can get healthy. I just don't think the Chargers have enough weapons to be able to compete with the passing defense. And so unless Gus Edwards all of a sudden goes bananas and they keep the ball away from Denver, I think Bo Nix has the ability to get the ball down the field with Cortland Sutton, produce some offense. So I'm taking Denver.
Yeah, still no practice for Dissly. Seems like he is going to be a long shot to play. Probably Stone Smart there. If you're looking for backfield clarification, Jaleel McLaughlin got injured, which is both a blessing and a curse. He was probably looking the best among Denver's backs the last couple of weeks, but if he is out, that might give a little more action and upside to Javonte Williams. I am also taking the Broncos to win this one, so hopefully it all pans out. We'll be eagerly watching that. We will be back on Friday with a preview of the rest of the Week 16 slate, which includes a pair of Saturday games as well as a full slate Sunday and Monday night as we get ready to lead into Christmas. But Dennis, if you've already binged through the Aaron Rodgers documentary on Netflix and you just still have some time to kill before Thursday Night Football, what can the people do?
Well, they can go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a subscribe, give us a like, leave us a rating and a review. We love that.
Well, that'll do it for us today. We will see you on Friday with a full preview of Week 16. Until then, you guys have a wonderful week.